I live in a city that hums with the constant energy of ambition and culinary dreams. I own a restaurant, a place I built from the ground up, pouring every ounce of my passion into its polished floors and handcrafted menus. My life is a whirlwind of inventory checks, staff meetings, and the quiet satisfaction of a dining room filled with happy customers. But beneath the surface of my success lies a complicated family dynamic, one that has always left me feeling like an outsider. This is the story of how a birthday dinner, meant to be a celebration of my father, turned into the evening where I finally served my family a dish of reality they never saw coming. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The invitation arrived not as a cheerful phone call or a heartfelt text, but as a forwarded email from my mother, Brenda. The subject line, written in her signature passive-aggressive style, read, "Forward, your father's 60th birthday, please read." It was a reservation confirmation for Lucille, a restaurant known for its Michelin stars and a wine list that cost more than my first car. It was the kind of place my mother adored, a stage for her to perform the role of a sophisticated woman with impeccable taste. I stared at the email, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. For years, my family had treated my own restaurant, The Grove, as a quaint little hobby. It was successful, celebrated by critics, and loved by its regulars, but in their eyes, it was a constant reminder that I had chosen a different path. My brother, Daniel, was a financial analyst, a real professional in their words. I was just a cook who got lucky. The email chain was revealing. Just booked the private room at Lucille for Dad's big 6-0, my mother had written to a group of her friends, all CC'd. It's a frightfully expensive place, but Robert deserves the best. We're keeping it a very small, exclusive affair. Just family. I wasn't on that original email. My inclusion was an afterthought, a forwarded message sent hours later with a curt note at the top, "Nikki, your father wants you there. 8 p.m. Saturday. Don't be late." There was no warmth, no personal touch. It was a summons, a command to appear at a place chosen specifically to highlight my perceived inadequacies. Lucille was everything The Grove wasn't. It was old money, legacy, and pretension. The Grove was new, innovative, and built on a foundation of hard work and genuine passion. They were celebrating my father's milestone at a place that represented everything they thought I should aspire to be, while simultaneously dismissing the world I had created for myself. I called my father, Robert, hoping for a moment of connection. "Hey, Dad. Got Mom's email. Excited for Saturday?" "Oh, Nikki. Yes, your mother has been planning it for months. You know how she is," he said, his voice laced with the weary resignation of a man who had long ago given up fighting his wife's social campaigns. "It sounds fancy," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Well, it's a special occasion. Your mother wanted to do something memorable." "Right," I replied. "Memorable." The conversation was brief and superficial. He didn't ask about the Grove, about my life, or about how I was feeling. It was the usual script. My mother made the plans, and the rest of us were expected to fall in line. I hung up the phone feeling more like a business obligation than a daughter. The invitation wasn't a request for my presence, it was a demand for my attendance at a celebration I was clearly not considered a true part of. The stage was set, and I had a feeling my role was already cast, the disappointing daughter who couldn't quite keep up. The text message from my mother arrived 2 days before the dinner, just as I was finalizing the weekend specials with my head chef, Carlos. My phone buzzed on the stainless steel prep table, and I glanced at the screen. It was a long paragraph from Brenda. "Nikki," it began, "I need to discuss the arrangements for Saturday. As you know, Lucille is an incredibly exclusive and expensive restaurant. The prix menu alone is several $100s per person, and that's before drinks. Your father and I are covering our share, and Daniel has already sent me his portion. I know things must be tight for you with the restaurant, so I wanted to give you a heads up." We'll need your contribution by tomorrow at the latest to finalize the booking. I had to read the message twice. It wasn't a question or a discussion, it was a demand for money, wrapped in a condescending assumption about my financial status. I know things must be tight for you, the words dripped with a smug pity that made my blood boil. She had no idea what my restaurant earned. She had never asked. She just assumed I was struggling, because in her mind, my career was not a legitimate success. I could have replied with a screenshot of my quarterly profits. I could have told her that the Grove's revenue last month could have paid for her precious dinner 10 times over. But I knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't about the money, it was about power. It was her way of reminding me of my place in the family hierarchy. I decided to call her. The conversation was as cold and transactional as her text message. "Mom, I got your text," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Oh, good. So you can transfer the money today?" she asked, no preamble, no "how are you?" I was a bit surprised, I admitted. Usually, for family events, we don't split the cost like this. She sighed, a sound of theatrical exasperation. "Nikki, this isn't one of your little potluck dinners. This is fine dining. It's how things are done in the real world. Everyone contributes." Daniel understood completely. Of course, he did. Daniel, who still had his laundry done at their house on weekends, was the golden child. "It's not about the money, Mom," I said, trying to explain. "It's the way you asked. You made it sound like I couldn't afford it." "Well, can you?" she shot back, her voice sharp and challenging. "Don't be embarrassed if you can't, dear. We can't all be as successful as your brother. Perhaps you should sit this one out if it's too much of a stretch. We wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable." The offer was a trap, a poisoned olive branch. If I said yes, I'd be admitting to the financial struggle she had invented for me. If I said no, I'd be proving her right. It was a perfectly constructed no-win scenario, designed to make me feel small and inadequate. "I can afford it," I said, my voice hardening. "I'll transfer the money. I wouldn't miss Dad's birthday for the world." "Fine," she sniffed, her victory complete. "See that you do." She hung up. I stood there in the middle of my bustling kitchen, surrounded by the sights and sounds of my success, and I had never felt so utterly disrespected. The price of admission to my own father's birthday dinner wasn't just a few $100s. It was my dignity. And my mother had just made it clear she thought it was a price I couldn't afford. Saturday evening arrived with a cold, drizzling rain that seemed to mirror my mood. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, elegant black dress that was understated but expensive. It was a quiet armor, a way to feel confident in a situation designed to make me feel the opposite. I arrived at Lucille a few minutes early, handing the keys to my modest but well-maintained car to the valet, who seemed to sneer at it compared to the parade of luxury vehicles lining the curb. I walked into the lobby, a cavernous space of marble floors and crystal chandeliers, and immediately felt the oppressive weight of its manufactured opulence. My family was already there, gathered near the host stand. My mother, Brenda, was in her element, holding a glass of champagne and laughing a little too loudly with the maitre d'. She was wearing a dress that shimmered under the lights, a queen holding court in her chosen palace. My father, Robert, stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was clearly too tight. My brother, Daniel, was on his phone, a look of bored indifference on his face. My mother spotted me and her smile tightened. "Ah, Nikki. You made it." She looked me up and down, a flicker of disappointment in her eyes that my appearance wasn't as shabby as she had imagined. "Of course, Mom." "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, giving my father a hug. He returned it awkwardly, patting my back as if I were a distant relative. "Good to see you, Nikki," he mumbled. Daniel didn't even look up from his phone. "Hey, sis." The maitre d', a man with a stiff posture and an even stiffer smile, approached our group. "Mrs. Richards, your table is ready." My mother beamed, taking my father's arm. Wonderful. We have a private room, you know, she announced to me, as if I were a guest she had just met. Only the best for Robert. We were led through the main dining room, a hushed and intimidating space where every clink of a fork seemed to echo. As we walked, I noticed something strange. The staff, the servers, the bussers, even the sommeliers, kept glancing at me. It wasn't a look of recognition, but something else, a kind of furtive, respectful acknowledgement. A young waitress caught my eye and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. The bartender, who I could see from the corner of my eye, straightened his tie as I passed. My family, wrapped up in their own self-importance, noticed nothing. My mother was too busy pointing out the exquisite floral arrangements, and my brother was still scrolling through his phone. We arrived at the private room, a secluded alcove with a single large table overlooking the city skyline. It was beautiful, I had to admit, but it felt cold and impersonal. "Isn't this divine?" Brenda declared, sweeping her hand across the room. I had to book it months in advance. As we settled into our chairs, the general manager of the restaurant, a distinguished-looking man in a tailored suit, entered the room. My mother's eyes lit up, clearly expecting him to fawn over her for gracing his establishment with her presence. He walked directly to our table, his gaze sweeping past my mother, my father, and my brother, and settled on me. He smiled warmly, a genuine, unaffected smile that was a stark contrast to the performative politeness of the rest of the staff. "Good evening," he said, his voice calm and clear. "It's a pleasure to see you again. We're so glad you could make it tonight." My mother's jaw dropped. Daniel finally looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed in confusion. My father just looked bewildered. The staged arrival had taken an unexpected turn, and the guest of honor, it seemed, was not who my mother had intended. The general manager's greeting hung in the air, thick with unspoken questions. My mother, Brenda, was the first to recover, her voice sharp with suspicion. "I'm sorry, do you two know each other?" she asked, her eyes darting between me and the manager. The manager, whose name was David, handled the moment with practiced ease. "My apologies, I should have introduced myself. I am David, the general manager of Lucille. And yes, your daughter and I have met on a few occasions." He directed his next words to me. "I trust everything is to your satisfaction so far?" "Everything is wonderful, David." "Thank you," I replied, my voice even. My mother was not satisfied. "Met where?" "Nikki, you never mentioned you'd been here before." The accusation was clear, I was hiding something, pretending to be someone I wasn't. "We move in similar circles," I said vaguely, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. David gave a slight bow. "Please, enjoy your evening. Your server will be with you shortly." He gave me one last, knowing look before exiting the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. "Similar circles? What on earth does that mean?" Brenda demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. "Mom, it's Dad's birthday." "Let's not make a scene," Daniel chimed in, though he was now looking at me with a newfound curiosity. The dinner began, but the atmosphere had shifted. The power dynamic had been subtly upended. My family, who had expected me to be intimidated by the restaurant's grandeur, was now off balance. Throughout the meal, I noticed the impeccable service. Our waiter was attentive, our water glasses were never empty, and the sommelier spent an inordinate amount of time discussing wine pairings with us. My mother preened, assuming the special treatment was for her, but I could see the staff's eyes kept flicking to me, seeking silent approval. The food, admittedly, was excellent. Each course was a work of art. But my family barely seemed to notice. They were too busy trying to solve the puzzle of my connection to this place. "So, Nikki," Daniel said, leaning forward. "How's the restaurant business? Still making sandwiches?" He said the word sandwiches with a condescending smirk, a callback to my early days when I ran a small cafe. "It's going well," I said, taking a sip of wine. We were just featured in a national food magazine. The critic called our tasting menu a revelation. This was news to them. I had never bothered to share my successes, knowing they would be met with dismissal or jealousy. "Oh, that's nice," Brenda said, forcing a smile. "I'm sure your little place has its charms." The conversation continued in this vein, a series of thinly veiled insults and backhanded compliments. They talked about Daniel's recent promotion, my father's golf handicap, and a lavish European vacation my parents were planning. I was an observer, a spectator at my own family dinner. But from my seat, I had a clear view of the entire dining room. I could see the intricate dance of the staff, the flow of service, the rhythm of a well-run restaurant. This was my world, my language. And as I watched, an idea began to form in my mind. A plan. The final course was cleared, and the waiter brought out a small, exquisite birthday cake for my father. We sang a stilted version of Happy Birthday, and my father blew out the single candle. "Well, this has been a lovely evening," Brenda announced, signaling for the check. "Pricey, but worth it for a special occasion." The waiter returned, but instead of a leather-bound bill folder, he placed a single, sealed envelope on the table in front of my mother. "What's this?" she asked. "A message from the management," the waiter said, his expression unreadable. My mother opened the envelope, her brow furrowed. As she read the note inside, her face went from confusion to disbelief, and then to a pale, slack-jawed shock. She looked up, her eyes wide, and stared directly at me. The view from my side of the table was crystal clear. The trap had been sprung. The note was simple, printed on Lucille's heavy, cream-colored stationery. It read, "Dear Mrs. Richards, we are so honored to have you celebrate your husband's 60th birthday with us tonight. Per the owner's personal instructions, there will be no bill for your party this evening. We hope you have enjoyed your meal." Brenda read it twice, her lips moving silently. She looked around the table, her eyes wild with confusion, before they landed on me. The carefully constructed facade of her perfect evening was crumbling. "What is this?" she whispered, sliding the note across the table to Daniel. "This is some kind of mistake." Daniel read the note, his cynical smirk faltering for the first time all night. He looked at me, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. "The owner's personal instructions? Nikki, what did you do?" My father, who had been quietly enjoying his cake, finally tuned in to the drama. "What's going on?" "They're not charging us," Brenda said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and humiliation. "They're making it sound like charity." Her mind couldn't process a reality where I held any kind of power. Her only explanation was that I had somehow begged the management for a handout. "Why would the owner do that?" Robert asked, genuinely perplexed. This was the moment. The culmination of years of being underestimated, dismissed, and disrespected. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, placed my glass down gently, and looked each of my family members in the eye. "The owner," I began, my voice calm and steady, felt it was the least she could do for her father's birthday. Silence. My words hung in the air, dense and heavy. My mother stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, the color draining from her face. Daniel's eyes widened in dawning horror. My father just looked lost. "What are you talking about, Nikki?" my father asked, his voice weak. "I'm talking about this restaurant," I said, gesturing to the elegant room around us. "Lucille. I bought it 6 months ago." The confession landed with the force of a physical blow. Brenda flinched as if I had slapped her. Daniel sank back in his chair, running a hand through his hair in disbelief. "You, what?" Brenda stammered. "That's impossible. You can't be. You own a small cafe." "I owned a small cafe," I corrected her gently. "Then I owned a successful bistro. And then I leveraged that success to build a restaurant group. The Grove is the flagship, but we have 3 other properties. Lucille was our most recent acquisition. It was struggling under the old management, so we came in, streamlined operations, and brought it back to life. I let the information sink in. I told them how I had worked tirelessly, reinvesting every penny, studying the business side of the industry until I knew it inside and out. I explained that David, the general manager, was my hire, a trusted colleague I had brought in to oversee the transition. The attentive service, the special treatment, it wasn't for them. It was for me. The staff wasn't just being polite, they were serving their boss. Brenda shook her head, a gesture of frantic denial. No. No, I don't believe you. You're lying. You're trying to embarrass me. Why would I lie about something like this? I asked. This is my restaurant. You are my guests. And you, I said, my gaze locking onto hers, are the one who told me I probably couldn't afford to eat here. The unveiling was complete. The truth was on the table, served colder and harder than any dish they had eaten all night. There was no more room for condescension, no more space for their carefully crafted narrative of my failure. They were sitting in my world, at my table, breathing my air. And they had no idea. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. My father, Robert, was the first to speak, his voice filled with a quiet awe. Nikki, is this true? All of it? I nodded. Yes, Dad. He looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. The distant, preoccupied father was gone, replaced by a man seeing his daughter for who she truly was. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, I'll be, he chuckled, a genuine, heartfelt sound. My daughter, the business mogul. Who knew? My brother, Daniel, was a different story. He was a numbers guy, a financial analyst. His mind was racing, calculating the assets, the revenue, the sheer scale of what I had just revealed. The condescending older brother was gone, replaced by a man looking at a competitor he had grossly underestimated. How, he asked, the single word laced with a grudging respect. How did you keep this so quiet? I didn't keep it quiet, I replied. You just never asked. You were all so convinced you knew what my life was, you never bothered to look at the reality. But my mother, Brenda, was not impressed. She was incandescent with rage. This wasn't a moment of family pride for her, it was a personal attack. I had not just revealed my success, I had shattered her reality, exposed her judgment as petty and false, and humiliated her in a place she had chosen as her stage. You did this on purpose, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You set this whole thing up to make me look like a fool. No, Mom, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. You did this. You chose the restaurant. You sent the condescending text message. You created a situation where I was supposed to feel small. I just decided not to play my part. I stood up from the table. I'd like to make a toast. I picked up my champagne flute. The others, hesitantly, followed suit. To Dad, I began, raising my glass. Happy 60th birthday. I'm so glad we could celebrate it here, in a place that means so much to me. And I hope that from now on, you'll feel just as comfortable celebrating at the Grove. I looked pointedly at my mother. The food is just as good, and I promise, you'll always be treated like family. I continued, my voice gaining strength. And a toast to the truth. To finally being seen for who we are, not who people assume us to be. To success that isn't measured in job titles or fancy suits, but in passion, hard work, and the courage to build something of your own. I clinked my glass against my father's. He was beaming. Daniel, after a moment's hesitation, touched his glass to mine, a silent admission of defeat. My mother did not raise her glass. She just sat there, her face a mask of fury, her champagne untouched. The toast was a celebration for some, but for her, it was an indictment. The truth had been served, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. The ride down in the elevator was silent and suffocating. My mother stood rigidly in the corner, her arms crossed, refusing to look at anyone. My father kept glancing at me with a proud, almost giddy expression. Daniel was staring at the floor, lost in his own calculations and regrets. When we reached the lobby, my mother finally spoke. "I'll be waiting in the car," she snapped at my father, before striding out the door without a backward glance. She didn't say goodbye. My father turned to me and pulled me into a hug, a real one this time, strong and sincere. "I am so proud of you, Nikki," he whispered in my ear. "I'm sorry. For not seeing it." "It's okay, Dad," I said, my throat tightening with emotion. It was the validation I had been craving for years. "No, it's not," he said, pulling back to look at me. "But I'd like to make it right. Can I come by the Grove for lunch this week? I want to see it. All of it." "I'd love that," I smiled. Daniel lingered, shifting his weight awkwardly. "Nikki," he started, "that was impressive. Seriously. A whole restaurant group? How did you even structure the financing for the acquisition?" The condescension was gone, replaced by a genuine professional curiosity. We talked for a few minutes about business, about investment strategies and operating margins. It was the first real conversation we'd had as adults, as equals. After they left, I stood in the lobby of my restaurant, the quiet hum of the closing staff around me. David walked over, a small smile on his face. "So," he said. "How did it go?" "It was everything I expected," I replied. "And more." The aftermath was swift and decisive. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 months. She couldn't handle the new reality, the one where she wasn't the matriarch bestowing her approval from on high. Her power had always been perception, and I had shattered the mirror she used to admire herself. Our relationship, already strained, was broken. But I realized it was a relationship I had been mourning for years, and now, I was finally free. My father, on the other hand, became a regular at the Grove. He brought his friends, showed off the restaurant, and for the first time, took a genuine interest in my work. He would sit at the bar and chat with Carlos, my head chef, asking questions about the ingredients and the cooking process. It was a new beginning for us, one built on a foundation of mutual respect. Daniel and I started talking more, too. Our conversations were no longer about family obligations, but about business, strategy, and sometimes, just about life. The sibling rivalry had dissolved, replaced by a tentative friendship. The birthday dinner at Lucille was meant to be a lesson in humility for me. Instead, it became a masterclass in reality for them. They had tried to put me in my place, but they had forgotten one crucial detail: I was the one who owned the place. I had spent years seeking their approval, hoping they would one day see my success as valid. But that night, I realized I didn't need their validation. My success was my own, built with my own hands. And it tasted far sweeter than any dish they could ever serve me.